This story takes place 4 years ago during my 8th grade year and during the summer after, and during my freshman year. Just to add some background info, during my 8th grade year, the class was made up of 3 girls, Alexis, Koi, and I. Let's call me Beep for the sake of not wanting to type my whole username. Alexis was super extroverted and kind, and Koi was super introverted and kind of cold to everyone but Alexis, and I because she was around us more. I got very close to both girls very fast because other than these 7th grade girls, we were all we had sometimes. And just to add to, I've known one of these 7th graders since we were 4, and another since we were about 7. Also, my mom passed away 2 years prior to this, and I was also beaten up pretty badly the year before. These things play in later. To start, after volleyball season had ended, I was bad at doing and turning in my homework. My dad thought that I was lazy, but the teachers thought that it was a learning disability. Turns out that I had ADHD. Anyways, because of not doing or being late with my homework, I would have to have lunch detention in one of the classrooms. This is when red flags at first started popping up. When I could see Koi and Alexis after lunch, Koi would tell me that the other girls were talking crap on me, which sadly for a while I believed. I never said anything about it to the other girls as to not start drama, but I did let it bring me closer to Koi, which was a big mistake. This happened quite a few times, but I chose to ignore it even though I felt so hurt by hearing it from someone that I trusted. After a while, I got my homework in consistently and I was able to start sitting with my group at lunch again. And to my surprise and to Koi's dismay, they seemed very excited to have me around again. Everything was doing okay for a while. Basketball season had started and I played hard and I was happy. At one point in time, since I was so close to the girls on the team, Alexis and the girl that I've known since we were 4, Sierra, they were like sisters to me too. I decided to come out to them because I had thought that I was since the 5th grade. And they were all super accepting and happy that I was proud to be who I was. The day after that practice, I decided to tell Koi. This is when things started to get really bad. Koi started becoming really clingy with me and showed a visible disapproval whenever I was with anyone but her. She started sending me angry messages when I would tell her that I couldn't hang out with her. She would ignore me if I said that I was hanging out with Alexis, and she would call me crying if I didn't text back for a while. As a 13-year-old girl raised by a dad and an older brother, I didn't get the full idea of how teenage girls were supposed to act, so I brushed this off as normal. Koi would do almost anything to get me to stay around her, and it started to make Alexis concerned. One day after practice, I was talking to Alexis and Sierra and I decided to ask if what Koi had said to me about them was true. They denied it and said that they didn't understand why she would do that, because they thought we were all friends. I confronted Koi and she said to me that they were lying, and that if I believed them, I would have to choose between her or them. I didn't really say much to her after that, and I had started distancing myself. But wait, there's more. And Koi seemed to be fine with me after I had pushed her away. She didn't call me, text me, and when she did talk to me, she seemed okay. Everything was going good again until our 8th grade state history field trip. Our teacher told us that we would be gone for 3 days and that since it was only us 3 girls, her and the school secretary, we would be staying with the secretary's aunt in her home. The 3 of us got really excited for the trip and thought it would be a good bonding experience. When we got to the house that we were staying at, we were informed that we would be staying downstairs together. In the area, there was a small living area and a bedroom. Alexis suggested that we all shared the bed, but I told her that I wasn't comfortable with doing that because of Koi. Alexis said that it was okay and decided to sleep on the couch. This was Koi's opportunity. "Hey, do you want to share the bed with me?" I was thinking that we'd all sleep in the living room actually. You can take the bed if you want though. Koi looked clearly disappointed, but agreed. When we all were settled in, Koi pulled some snacks from her bag. One of them was Pocky and asked if we wanted some. Alexis and I said sure and took a few Pocky, but then Koi asked me if I would like to play the Pocky game with her. I got very nervous and uncomfortable, but I didn't want to be rude because they were her snacks and she was sharing with us. So she put the end of the Pocky in her mouth and so did I. The only thing to note is that I purposely broke the Pocky because I didn't want to kiss her. She seemed slightly angered and asked to do it again, but Alexis said that we should just go to bed. The rest of the trip went fine and there were no other awkward encounters with Koi and I, and we actually had a lot of fun. Everything was actually good up until after the school year had ended. Koi kind of reeled me in and I became her friend again because she seemed to change. One day, she invited me over to her house to hang out and play video games, and I stupidly agreed. When I got there, we played on her computer for a while before she suggested going outside and playing in the sprinkler since it was hot out. I said yes, but I would have to borrow a swimsuit from her. After I changed, she told me to go back into her room. For my sake, I'm going to skip over what happened next because it still really bothers me that it happened even though it didn't go that far. After that experience, I deleted Koi's number and started refusing to talk to her. High school started and everything was okay. She stopped trying to text me or contact me really at all. But one fateful day in December, she decided to message me. She started by saying how worried she was about me, and that she missed me, but I was straight up honest and said that I think it would be better if we stopped speaking. She then proceeded to freak out. She told me that she was in love with me and that what I was doing to her was cruel. That she has done everything to try to be with me, but I was mean and I kept rejecting her. And she even threatened to end her own life because I wasn't in love with her. For my sake, I then decided to block her on everything so she wouldn't contact me again. The last time that I saw her, I was at a pizza hut with my dad, but she didn't see me, luckily. I hope she's doing better now. It's been about 4 years since all this happened. This actually happened a few hours ago, and I'm still unsettled about the whole encounter. I decided to drop it over here to get it out of my system. I've had creeps tailgate me or try to grab my attention on the road, and I just ignore them, which always worked. But this guy takes the golden medal. My shift starts at the afternoon, and I was feeling off for most of the day. It was a beautiful sunny day, mind you. You know, one of those days where you drag yourself out of your bed to adulting. I decided to lift my mood up, so I wore something new that I had. A beautiful, creamy white faux fur vest, and I hit the road. I look like $1,000,000, and I feel like $1,000,000, right? Maybe not. I played some piano tracks and hoped that I would get out of this funk. I just needed something to comfort me, and those two things didn't cut it. While I was driving to work, I decided to grab a drink. An iced, crisp green tea will definitely lift my spirit. There are 2 branches of a famous coffee shop. You know who, a grinning mermaid who's playing Twister. Does it ring a bell? I could have gone to the first one with the drive-thru, but they use a pretty crappy tea brand as they ran out of the good stuff. So I had to go to the one that was inside a mall. Anything to feel better, right? I parked my car and saw a private fleet of black SUVs, making it difficult to view the entrance. This will be important later. I grabbed a cold bottle of water and I headed to the counter. I paid for my drink and got a cherry lollipop, cause why not? I waited for my drink, and once I got it, I started walking out. I had to pass a fountain in the courtyard before I could reach the exit. I slowed my pace as I noticed that I was walking too fast. I felt a bit of it, but I brushed it off. As I passed between the SUVs, a bus shot through quickly, and I stopped in shock as I almost walked in its path. This didn't make me realize what was happening. As I got distracted and wasn't aware of my surroundings, I walked further and I had to pass an area where there isn't anyone. It was shaded but still outdoor, almost like under a bridge-style building, if that makes any sense. This was the way to my car. I noticed that I wasn't aware of my surroundings till I heard footsteps on my right, and then I saw a man in my peripheral vision walking and matching my speed. At first, I thought he was in uniform, so I assumed he was a part of the cleaning staff in the mall. I felt off, but I told myself that I'm being paranoid and overthinking. Next, to my car and on my left side was a woman with her child, who were just getting into their car. This will make sense later. I was sandwiched between my car and hers. I was getting my keys out of my fur vest, and then I had to turn around in order to open my driver door, as I was a bit ahead of it. Once I turned, I saw a man standing. He looked like he was in his late 30s, skinny, average height. He had a dark blue baseball cap on with sunglasses, a gray shirt with some print on it, and black sweatpants. Crocs shoes with socks. He was so close that it took me by surprise and I was startled. But being nice and polite is in my blood, so I assumed nothing. The first thing that he said, "Why are you afraid?" I told him that I wasn't and asked him what he wanted. "Is your car for sale?" he said while grinning. I said no, and then he started to ask about how my day was going and stuff along those lines. The heck, I don't know you. Alarm bells were ringing in my head. I smiled as to not escalate the situation, but I knew that I had to do something. He was blocking my way to the mall entrance, and if I decided to go the other way, which is a pretty large shaded parking lot, with few people here and there. "It was nice to meet you, but I gotta leave," I said while smiling. "Give me your phone number," he said bluntly. I just repeated the same phrase and took a step closer to my door, as I didn't want to show him that I was afraid. I was crapping brakes at that moment. Then he said something that made me want to crawl out of my skin. "Give me your phone number so I don't have to chase you around in my car." At this moment, I knew that I had to move fast, so I opened my door and ignored him. He kept talking and I wasn't sure what he was saying as it felt muffled. My anxiety was higher than at the top of Mount Everest now, and I was hit with this realization that even in public spaces and in broad daylight with people around, you can lose your sense of safety in a split second. I closed the door quickly and locked it. My fingers felt weak, but I managed to turn on the car. He kept knocking at my window. He was so insistent. I put my car in reverse, but I couldn't back out. The woman was halfway of getting out of her parking spot, thus forcing me to wait. He kept knocking pretty hard and saying stuff, and at that moment I honestly couldn't hear him. All I wanted was to nope out of there. I was so afraid and just baffled. I had to look at the window to see when the road would clear so I could get back out, while he was standing in front of my window rapidly knocking it. I avoided making eye contact with him. Once the road was clear, I hit the gas pedal and I sped off. I drove to random places while my eyes were fixed on my rearview mirror to make sure that he wasn't following me. It was so hard to breathe as my chest felt so heavy and my heart was beating out of my chest. I was glad that he wasn't there. This creep had followed me all around the mall and waited for the right moment that I was alone, and threatened me to give him my phone number and was totally unaware of how much of a creep he was. My therapist will definitely hear about this. I am a 72-year-old man. This happened a long time ago, but I remember it so well. The background was a series of events that placed me in a mountain cabin outside of Frederick, Maryland, circa 1969 or 1970. Just say my life at the time was in disarray. I had dropped out of college and my father had died very badly, and I was alienated. I needed to get my mind right. The opportunity to move into an isolated cabin to live in contemplation and solitude was welcome. I'd had some inheritance money to pay for it. To the best of my memory, I was there 8 to 9 months. No TV but books and radio. I had a library card and I can't remember if I even had a phone. The story begins when a month into my stay, a female beagle showed up at my door. She was a lost dog and I took her in. I never could train her to do anything, but I fed her and she was a sweet, if not the brightest dog. A few months in, I began to feel a presence around the isolated cabin. It's hard to describe, but I felt like someone was watching. On many occasions, I thought that someone might even be looking into my cabin window, watching us. The next phase was the shadowing of the following. I knew the folks a half-mile down the lane, woods all around, and they would sometimes visit them at night. Someone or something was waiting for me, and followed closely in the woods beside me in the darkness. You could hear it easily, footsteps in the woods, and it picked up its pace as I did. It not only happened to me, but to my younger brother who visited and to friends, and it spooked them big time. At night, I was out there around the cabin. Here's the funny thing. I was never afraid or felt threatened. Not at all, at least early on. There was no feeling of malevolence. I spent a good bit of time wandering the vast areas of woodlands around me. There was a state park just up the hill, and the Frederick Municipal Forest went on for mile after mile. The whole of western Maryland was much more country than it is now. None of the development had set in yet. In our hikes, the dog and I, we came across evidence of campsites, recent ones in the woods. Traces of fires, old abandoned buildings that had corners that gave shelter and looked slept in. Garbage, food and drink, paper, what have you. Perhaps hunters, but much of it did not have the organized feel you would get from an experienced hunter. The last month of my stay there was when things intensified. Maybe he sensed I was preparing to leave. In the mornings, I would find small dead animals at the bottom of the front porch steps. The cabin had a small front porch, screened with a light door, and 4 wooden steps to the ground. A spotlight would illuminate the long front yard, with woods close by either side. And dead animals began to appear at the bottom of the steps many mornings. I remember small birds and then a squirrel, a rabbit, even a weasel one day. It was like they were offerings. I had to grab them up before the dog ate them. This went on almost daily for several weeks at a time. One night very late, I was awoken by some sound. I lay in bed and heard something from the porch. I hopped up and hit the lights, and I saw that hound dog, who never learned to sit or stay, standing at the front door in a perfect point position. She was shaking in fear. She never barked, and I heard the door slam and footsteps down the steps. I hit the spotlight, but I saw nothing. I went out. He had been on the porch at my front door, maybe trying to enter. After that, I stayed in at night more and more, and the animal offerings got bigger and bigger. Larger birds, a possum, a woodchuck. It wasn't funny. The final 2 gifts were legs from either horses or cows, big and bloody, and one was skinned. The second to the last day, the dog left me. I could hear her in the woods howling on a trail, following a scent. I looked for her in every way that I could, came up in following weeks, but to no avail. She left as she came. I moved back to the Maryland suburbs of DC, got an apartment with a friend, and got a job and moved on with my life. One day, not long after I picked up the Washington Post, there was an article about recent encounters with the Sykesville monster. It had described a tall, Yeti-like creature, fur covered on 2 legs that would pick out a family or person and give them attention. I wasn't the only one. That attention described in the article was exactly what had happened to me. Following you at night, looking inside the house, gifts, and so on. I was shocked. If I had turned on that spotlight and seen a Bigfoot or a Yeti, I might still be running. But I think I know who it was. Sykesville, Maryland was the location of the Springfield Hospital Center, a large state psychiatric hospital. It was 20 miles or so east of Frederick. Back then, many folks knew how to live in the woods, and they grew up that way. You know, country folk. I think the monster was an escaped patient, or just a free schizophrenic who lived outside. And this is like all the homeless you see in cities now. Probably off his meds, but somehow functional and lonely. He would pick people or families to adopt. The camps in the woods could have been him. Nothing to do, he would make mischief. I think he liked me but sensed that I was leaving. I can't prove any of this, it's just my theory. My monster was very much of that time and place, and his behavior was what I noticed in nearly every case then. I do not think he could have survived until the 1980s. Deinstitutionalization of mental hospitals threw the mentally ill out into the streets and took away the shelter of hospitals.